We need to talk about Khanna's visit to Taiwan and this connection to Richie Torres as well. Now, before we get into all this, I want to go ahead and say and make this very clear so that people are not confused. When we talk about this conflict between Taiwan and China, you do have to understand that Taiwan is a part of China. It's not his own thing. It is a part of China. So it's important that you know that before we get into this piece. So Ro Khanna was in Taiwan. He's not the first to go there. Last year, Nancy Pelosi went there. Ed Markey also went there. So there have already been trips to Taiwan from U.S. politicians. Obviously, when Nancy Pelosi first went there, we kind of, shrugged a little bit and was kind of like, oh, why would you go there right now? It's almost like you're trying to make China angry in some way, shape, or form. But multiple U.S. politicians have been there now at this point. And I want you to hear how this turned out. It says U.S. lawmakers visiting Taiwan affirm shared values. And what do they mean by that? This is actually a bipartisan effort. So it is Republican politicians and Democrat politicians coming together for this venture. So again, this just goes back to show you that when it comes to bipartisanship, especially when it comes to war, imperialism, intervention, they get on the same page. See, they can come together and do bipartisanship for war, for conflict abroad, but they don't want us to come together and oppose war. Some people didn't want leftists to come together with people who were libertarians for the Rage Against War rally because they said, no, you don't cross the line. But it's okay for these politicians to cross the line to be pro-war. Make it make sense. So going in here, so there is Ro Khanna meeting with the president of Taiwan. And let's dive in here. A delegation of U.S. lawmakers on Tuesday met with Taiwan's president, who promised to deepen military cooperation between the two sides, despite objections from China, which claims the island as its own territory. It's really interesting here. It says it claims it. That's because it is. Oh my God. I don't know. The group was one of many U.S. delegations President Tsai has welcomed in recent years, even as Beijing has stepped up diplomatic and military harassment of Taiwan. China responded to foreign visits by holding large-scale military exercises seen by some as a rehearsal for a blockade or invasion. Beijing has not ruled out the use of force to unite Taiwan with mainland China. Although the sides have been separated since a civil war in 1949, and most Taiwanese prefer to keep the status quo of de facto independence. We're going to get into this in just a second because I do have something from Danny Haiphong I want to show you in reference to this. And this story also has to deal with the poll. So if you haven't had a chance to take that poll, go ahead and do that. Tsai thanked the lawmakers for coming, saying it's a chance to deepen ongoing cooperation in a semiconductor chip design and manufacturing, renewable energy, and next generation 5G mobile networks. Taiwan and the U.S. will continue to bolster military exchanges. Going forward, Taiwan will cooperate even more actively with the U.S. and other democratic partners to confront such bold challenges as authoritarian expansionism and climate change. Let's go on. Tensions between the U.S. and China increased after Washington shot down a suspected Chinese spy balloon. Oh boy, that Beijing maintains was an unmanned weather balloon. It was a weather balloon. They're still talking about it. They're still bringing it up. Both sides are also in opposition on the war in Ukraine, and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken warned Sunday that Beijing could be considering providing weapons to Russia for the war. Now, isn't this what we predicted? We have to remember BRICS. So China and Russia are a part of BRICS. And this is what we've been trying to warn people, right? Isn't this what Jose has said every time he's confronted politicians and he's told them, you need to keep us from a nuclear war? This is exactly what we've been talking about. This is what we talked about at the Rage Against the War rally. Like, you think that it's just going to be Russia? You think China wouldn't come in to help Russia, to aid them? They're a part of BRICS. They're together, man. This is what we've been trying to tell people. Let's go on. Taiwan remains a flashpoint. Wang Yi, the Chinese Communist Party's most senior foreign policy official, said over the weekend that Taiwan has never been a country and it will not be a country in the future. I mean, I don't know what else to say. We are here to affirm the shared values between the U.S. and Taiwan, a commitment to democracy, a commitment to freedom. That's coming from Khanna. The U.S. under President Biden's leadership seeks peace in the region. Okay, yeah, they seek peace. All right. We're going to show you how that's not necessarily the case. He is accompanied by Representative Tony Gonzalez of Texas, Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts, and Jonathan Jackson of Illinois. The group met with their legislative counterparts Monday, as well as Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company founder Morris Chang. Khanna also offered a tribute to former President Jimmy Carter, who recently entered hospice care. He was president when Congress passed the Taiwan Relations Act, under which the U.S. must ensure Taiwan can defend itself. Now, I want to highlight this piece here, defend itself, right? Because we've seen this phrase used often. This phrase is also used in reference to Israel and Palestine. Haven't you heard people say this before? Israel has a right to defend itself. You know, let me tell you what that really means. Let me tell you what that really means. That means that the United States government, if needed to, they would supply them with the arms so that they can do that. It's always interesting. It's always interesting because it's one country has the right to defend theirself, but the other one doesn't. And that's how they put that. Now, Khanna actually did an interview. Oh, am I going to that yet? Let's go to Danny next. So Danny talked about this on this show with me. Now, this was a couple of months ago, I think, when we first started hearing about this issue. And Danny breaks this down so great. So listen to what Danny says. Like, this is kind of like his wheelhouse. Like, he talks about China a lot. But listen to how he explains what's really happening here.
And it's rarely talked about like this because the narrative that the Western media likes to push out is that China is the aggressor. China is seeking to dominate the island. Now there's this comparison between Taiwan and Ukraine, which is absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous. It's a completely different situation. But the one similarity here is that the United States, similar to what happened in Ukraine, instigating, interfering politically, the United States is doing that in Taiwan. It just so happens that Taiwan is not an independent country. It is part of China, and it is recognized as such by the vast majority of the international community.
So how can China, like, technically, if Taiwan is a part of China, then technically, how can China invade a country that's already a part of China? So that goes back to some of the talking points that I'm hearing from mainstream media and Joe Biden himself, who said that recently, I think it was a couple of days ago, that if China were to invade Taiwan, that the United States government would get involved and back Taiwan. But technically, you can't invade a country that's already a part of your country. Make it make sense, people. Someone make it make sense to me, because that would be like, you know, Washington, D.C. So Washington, D.C. is the District of Columbia. It's not a state, right? So there is this push for D.C. to have statehood, but it does not have a state. That would be like someone saying that Maryland or people from Maryland are going to invade D.C. when it's like, how do you? They're both a part of the same country. Do you see what it's just weird. I don't know if that's the best analogy or not, but you get what I'm getting at. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. But there's something else that Danny says here.
And that's exactly right. So China treats Taiwan, and it has done so ever since the ever since the Chinese Revolution, right, has treated Taiwan as kind of similar to how Hong Kong is an administrative region of China, so it is slightly different. But in terms of the orientation toward Taiwan, China has treated Taiwan as sort of like a one country, two systems model, right? So Taiwan is considered part of China. And of course, there's a very complex history, a lot of political differences. And so China has allowed Taiwan to continue its system. And really the whole move forward has been peaceful reunification. That's the goal, to integrate Taiwan and China as close together as possible economically and in all sorts of other areas, because there are a lot of ties, right? I mean, we're talking about an island that has centuries, right? Centuries upon centuries worth of history, families that have bonds with each other on both sides, right? So there's a lot of interest in peacefully reunifying. But when Biden made these comments, and that was the third time he has made such comments, the third time he has said, if China invades, quote unquote, Taiwan, then the United States would intervene militarily. When he says these comments, basically what he's doing is he's throwing out basically 50 years of U.S.-China diplomatic relations, right? He's from the 1972 joint communique all the way to the 1992 consensus, all of which state that the United States recognizes one China. It recognizes that Taiwan is part of China. Essentially what Biden is doing is throwing that out in favor of U.S. hegemonic, U.S. militarist interests, because really what saying such a thing is all about is nothing to do. It has nothing to do with facts of the matter, with will China actually invade Taiwan. It's all about feeding the military-industrial complex.
There you go. That is really what this is about. Now, if you want to see that full conversation, you know what, Eric, we should clip this whenever we get time, because we didn't clip this interview. We should clip it, because especially now, considering Ro Khanna just went to Taiwan. But this was posted 8 months ago, and it's on that same stream where it's Ryan Grimm and Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Nomiki Kunst, Emma Vigilant. Man, that's a lot of names. But anyway, it was posted 8 months ago. So if you want to see the full thing, but I'll see if we can clip it too, so that way you guys can have that clip just to refer back to. And now here is Ro Khanna, because I want you to remember what Danny just said. It's more about feeding into the military-industrial complex, okay? The United States government doesn't really care about these people. I don't know how else to say it to people, but they really don't. If there was no money involved for this, they wouldn't even be there. Now, Ro Khanna had an interview on Fox News, of all places, about this particular issue and about his visit. Listen to this.
Well, the Chinese have not responded to this latest news on Saudi Arabia offering this $40 million in aid. What they have responded to is an American delegation that made its way to Taiwan over the last few days. Republicans and Democrats both. That did not sit well with China. They called it a provocative act. We had two congressmen part of that journey, back from that journey, California Democrat Representative Ro Khanna and Texas Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Obviously, this was a bipartisan effort, and to you, Congressman Gonzalez, first, why make the trip, knowing that the reaction would be, just as you discovered from China, that it was provocative, almost as bad as when Nancy Pelosi went, they said? Yeah.
In other words, he's asking, why the hell do you guys keep going there? That's the street translation for you. Why the hell do you guys keep going there? There was a lot of controversy over it when Nancy Pelosi went there and more people went there. And now you're going there too, Ro Khanna. Why you guys keep going there? That's really what he's trying to ask.
Now, here in the House, we don't pay attention what the communist China propaganda puts out. It's important that the House lead, though. And too often we point to the White House.
Notice how they always throw communists in front. Listen to this. Let me see. Notice how they always lead with this. Listen.
Almost as bad as when Nancy Pelosi went, they said.
Yeah, now here in the House, we don't pay attention what the communist China propaganda puts out.
The communist China propaganda. That article that I read to you earlier also referred to it as that way. And I think it's important for people to understand too, technically, and you can look this up if you don't believe me, technically, we do not have a true communist country. Not one. Let's go on.
It's important that the House lead, though. And too often we point to the White House for not doing X, Y, or Z. You know, the House of Representatives is an equal branch of government, and this is an area that is a bipartisan effort to go all across the globe and stand with our allies. You know, when I was, you talk about provocative. When I was in the Navy, we used to fly on a P-3 surveillance flights against China, and China would come out and they would harass our airplanes. The exact same thing is happening now. The only thing is they're harassing our P-8s. So this is dangerous. China is being irresponsible in the way they're reacting, and it's important that we have bipartisan direction when we go out and talk about it in the world.
I do feel like the U.S. is provoking them at this point. Again, these multiple visits to Taiwan, it's obviously making a statement, telling everyone that their balloon was a spy balloon when it's been clear that this was a weather balloon. Like, it is very obvious that the United States is trying to provoke them. Now, there are many criticisms that you can make of China in reference to its government, but at the same time, I feel like the U.S. is really trying to push a conflict here where there really should not be one.
Switching to you, Congressman Khanna, as you know, we're committing now 200 troops to Taiwan, I think from around 30 now. And that is something else that's not been greeted favorably, not surprisingly, by Taiwan. Do you support that? Because some look at that as a preview to coming attraction that will send still more troops and more and more. What do you say?
Our commitment to train Taiwan in its own self-defense is appropriate, and I think there's nothing provocative.
See how they always refer to it as defense? Notice how they always do that? So he's letting you know right now, and I have something else I'm going to show you too. It is our duty to train them in their own defense.
About American politicians going to Taiwan, given our economic ties with semiconductors, given that Taiwan is a democracy, given that President Carter, who signed the Taiwan Relation Act and recognized China, was in Taiwan in 1999.
But President Carter right now is on his deathbed. You know, it's just like now all of a sudden you guys want to bring up President Carter's name. You guys ain't have anything to say about Jimmy Carter the past, what, decade?
So there's no reason for China to think that American politicians continuing in a tradition that President Carter actually started going to Taiwan is any problem. So
it's Jimmy Carter's fault. See, you see how they pass the buck. Khanna is notorious for doing this, blaming somebody else. Well, actually, it was this person who started it. Just because someone started it doesn't mean you have to continue it. Sounds like excuses to me.
Let me ask you both this, Congressman Gonzalez. If China were to invade Taiwan, is that an act of war to which we should commit our troops?
I think President Biden has made it very clear that we are going to stand with Taiwan, that we are going to remain there by our allies. But we got to get to a point. I spent 20 years in the military. I spent 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I want to prevent wars. I don't want to see America get dragged into another war, whether that's in Taiwan or elsewhere.
No, I disagree. If you really wanted to prevent wars, then why did you go over to Taiwan in the first place when you knew that that would escalate the situation? If you really wanted to prevent it, we'll have to look up and see how Tony Gonzalez voted in reference to sending money to Ukraine too. We'll have to look that up to see if he really wanted to prevent war.
I understand that, but if China invaded Taiwan despite that, is that an act of war to which we should commit troops?
Oh, 100%. And yeah, I would argue that China.
There it is. There it is. Notice he had to ask the question twice because he didn't answer it the first time. So he's letting you know if China were to invade Taiwan, he said, would that be a situation where the U.S. government would send U.S. troops? He said, oh, absolutely. So get ready, guys. Get ready. We already have one conflict happening right now. And it's just like they can't go 1 year without another potential conflict.
Is doing that exact thing right now in the cyberspace. That's where these wars start. They start in cyber, and then they go on from there. So it's absolutely important that we have a bipartisan delegations continue to make this trek and show that America is going to stand by its allies.
Bipartisan, like I told you. See, they can be bipartisan for pro-war, or as they like to call it, defense. They can be bipartisan for that, but we can't be bipartisan out on the streets against war.
All right. Does that mean then to you as well, Congressman Khanna, that China invading Taiwan, to take it back, as it says it's theirs anyway, that we should commit ourselves to protecting Taiwan, defending Taiwan, having U.S. soldiers in Taiwan?
Well, first of all, let me just echo what Representative Gonzalez said. We can and will avoid war in China. That was clear to me meeting the president there and the leadership there. If we help Taiwan build up.
That's not what Gonzalez said. Ro Khanna said, let me echo what Gonzalez said. We can prevent war with China. That's not what Gonzalez said. Gonzalez said, yeah, oh, absolutely, in reference to if they would send military troops there. That's what he said. Did we listen to the same interview? Did we listen to the same conversation? So I'm a little bit confused, because it doesn't sound like you're trying to prevent any type of conflict with China. Based on the behavior that I've seen from politicians in DC over the past couple of months, it seems like you're trying to escalate things. That's what it seems like to me.
Its defense and deterrence, and at the same time have engagement. There's no reason there needs to be war, and that should be the goal. War there would be catastrophic for the world and the American economy.
It sounds like China.
That's Ro Khanna, the politician, talking there, because that's Ro Khanna trying to save face. Because remember, he's supposed to be a progressive, so he knows he needs to be careful with what he says here. You see what I'm saying? That's right. That's right, Damon. That's exactly right. He's lying. So he knows. That's the thing. He knows. Well, let me be careful. Let me not even mention, yes, we would do that. We would go to war with them. I got to be careful.
Preparing for something here. They're not just ranting out of, vapor. So I'm just wondering whether you would support that if it came to that.
I would support what our policy has been with the Taiwan Relation Act, which says that we will support Taiwan in its defense. It's purposely ambiguous, and it would be the call of the commander-in-chief at the time. I think that policy has served us well from a national security perspective since the days of Nixon and Kissinger, and I affirm that policy.
See, he wouldn't answer the question whether or not he would support war with China. He said, oh, I support the policy that we have right now with Taiwan. He doesn't want to go on record. See, that's how they prevent going on record, by saying that. And he's already gotten some pushback in reference to that letter that he signed about the Nazification in Ukraine in 2018. He's already gotten pushback. People are saying, like, why did you vote to send the money when you signed that letter in 2018? So that's him trying to prevent himself going on record by saying, yes, I would agree with that. But it's not just him, because there's more. I told you they've been fear-mongering people about Russia. They've been fear-mongering people about China. And it's not just Ro Khanna. Now here you have Richie Torres. He has the audacity to stand up here and talk about human rights. Listen to it. Don't even get up out of your seat yet. Listen to what he says about human rights. And then I'm going to tell you why he's another fraud. Now, this is in reference to China. And by the way, this is his tweet. He says the Chinese Communist Party has a network of overseas police stations hidden in countries like the US that terrorize Chinese human rights activists. How can we claim to be a defender of freedom abroad if we fail to defend freedom fighters here at home on the US soil? Now, we're going to get back to that statement because he's a hypocrite. But listen to this. Oh, not Twitter again. Twitter's videos. I hate that they do this sometimes, but sometimes they do. It's like you have to refresh it. But it's just really funny to me. He has the nerve to talk about human rights. Please.
From opposing political parties, we're sending a powerful message that the defense of human rights from the abuses of the CCP is not a Democratic value or a Republican value, it's an American value. I am not here because I'm a Democrat, and Mike and Neil are not here because they're Republicans. We are here because we're Americans who believe in the rule of law and human rights and freedom for every single person, including the Chinese dissidents here in the United States.
That's a lie. If he believes in human rights for every single person, then why is it recently when he was confronted about the Palestinians in reference to Israel and Palestine, why did he continue to go on and make excuses for the behavior from the state of Israel, the government, towards the Palestinians, pushing them out, basically committing apartheid? He made excuses for the state of Israel. He was asked multiple times when he was confronted at his meeting in his own district by his own constituents, what about the Palestinians? What about the Palestinian people? Isn't that technically a human rights violation as well? The way those people are being treated there. And a lot of times people bring up the Palestinians, but it's not just about them, because we also need to talk about the Ethiopians who are there too, who are also being pushed out, who have also had racist attacks. So it's not even just the Palestinians. He didn't want to support them at all. Go back and watch the clip on Jose Vega's Twitter page. Go watch that clip again. We covered it on the show. No sympathy for the Palestinian people, just for the state of Israel. Now, there's a reason for that. Because if you look at his donors, I'll pull that up in a second. Let's finish the video. I'm going to show you why he has the views that he has.
We know that the CCP has a global system of surveillance that not only includes high-altitude surveillance balloons, but also oversees police stations. And we know that the transnational policing is not actually about the solving of crimes. It's about the systematic surveillance and suppression of political dissidents. It's about striking fear in the hearts of critics of the CCP.
Now, he can condemn the police in reference to this particular situation, but he supports the police when it comes to protecting the rights of Americans in this country, because he was against defunding the police. He spoke out against it. So when it comes to protecting unarmed people, especially unarmed Black people that are killed by the police, he protects the police. But you can protect the people. See, this is the thing. When it comes to the Asian American people, no shade to them, but when it comes to the Asian American people being protected, he's willing to call out the police state. But he can't call out he can't call out the police state when it comes to them killing unarmed Black people. Can't call out the NYPD. You guys see how this works? This is why I said these people are all frauds. Let's go back. Let's go back in. There's more.
Freedom has no greater enemy than fear, and striking fear is the point of CCP policing. And so we have a moral obligation to stand with you, to stand for freedom fighters.
He has a moral obligation to stand with them, but not the people in his own district. He doesn't have a moral obligation to stand. He won't stand with his own constituents. Well, I've seen this on video, by the way, but he'll stand for them because that is an attack and criticism against China. Meanwhile, inciting fear in the American people about China and spreading that.
How can we, the United States of America, claim to be a defender of freedom if we fail to defend freedom fighters within our own borders, here on U.S. soil? A few years ago, the FBI said The Justice Department said that it's committed to turning Operation Fox Hunt on its head so that the hunters become the hunted and the pursuers become pursued. And we will see to it that that promise is kept and that freedom is defended and justice for dissidents is delivered. Thank you.
Freedom for who? You see how that's why it's just, there may be disagreements between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, or some people in the Republican Party right now, when it comes to this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There may be some disagreements there where some Republicans are like, no, we need to stop sending money to Ukraine, like that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, both parties are pro-war, and they definitely come together when it comes to demonizing China. Both of them. Now, shout out to Garland Nixon for sending me this, because I want you to hear something that Lindsey Graham says in reference to China and Taiwan. Listen to this. Pay very close attention to what he says. Not this again. That's Twitter for you. Let me try to refresh it. Because this is foreshadowing. He's giving you a hint as to what is probably going to happen.
As long as they're the largest state sponsor of terrorism. So if you want to receive what Putin did, try to go into Taiwan. They're going to fight to the last man in Taiwan. They're going to fight to the last man in Taiwan. And we're going to strangle the Russian economy as long as they're the largest state sponsor of terrorism. So if you want to receive what Putin did, try to go into Taiwan. They're going to fight to the last man in Taiwan. They're going to fight to the last man in Taiwan.
Let me go to some of these comments here and we'll go to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, The Traveler. There's a YouTuber named Li Jingjing who covered the situation with China and Taiwan recently, and one of her guests brought up the presence of NGOs and U.S. aid in their schools. Thank you for letting me know that. I will check that out. Thank you, Ashura. The pro-war rally was 200 compared to 2K last week. Yeah, I saw that too. Leroy, what's up? There are people invading. It's just gentrification. Are you talking about DC? That's a good point. The Oracle says the United States is not involved in anything that is not a prelude to advancing the cause of capitalism, which underpins its imperialism and hegemony. Angela, remember when the Dems lost their collective nummies over the fact that Trump called the leader of Taiwan right after he was sworn in, saying it was unheard of to break the one China policy? There you go. Saul says there's no profit in peace. Nope. Thank you for the super chat, Free Food. The U.S. is definitely crazy, but Danny Let's try this again. The U.S. is definitely crazy, but Danny also oversimplifies the situation. Go visit, do your own research, and talk to people. There's no easy fix. Thank you for that, Free Food. Thank you, Ali. These warmonger politicians are going to get us wiped out of the map right after the economy crashes beyond repair. Bill, striking fear is the point of their policing, as opposed to what? Our cops that have military grade equipment they use regularly? That's a good point. Good point. And then we're going to go ahead and skedoodle to that poll. I'm ready whenever you are, Eric. I am in the okay, here we go. The poll question: do you feel the US is trying to start a conflict with China? 92% of you said yes, 3% of you said no, and 4% said not sure. That was 607 votes. Interesting. I don't think I've ever had a poll that's that the results are that extreme. Usually there's more, usually there's more no's and more not sure's, but very different, very different.